In this video, I am taking you back to the basics. This is a basic sleeve pattern tutorial. This particular one is my daily driver. It is simplified, easy to explain, easy to understand, easy to use, and it doesn't take time. Aside from showing you how to draft this pattern, I'll be showing you how to alter it a bit to fit into the armhole you are creating. So that way you don't have your sleeve curve looking wider than the armhole curve on your basic bodice block. I'll be showing you all of that in this video. With this, I'm welcoming you to Kema Freak. My name is Kemi Omorogbe. Let's do this. I'll start by showing you how to take proper body measurement for this method of your basic sleeve block. So just like when you're taking the measurement of the full body, you have the vertical measurement and the horizontal measurement. There is something we call the cap height, which is basically from the top of the sleeve, the part attached to the shoulder, to the bicep line. I will show you the bicep line on the pattern when we get to that. But to estimate your cap height, you need to know the person's bust circumference. So that way, the cap height increases based on the bust circumference, and that's an estimation, okay, and it can be adjusted if need be. So you don't need to actually measure the distance between the top of the sleeve to the bicep line. You can just estimate the cap height using the bust circumference. I'll show you that, so don't worry. Okay, now let's move on to the actual vertical measurement. That's the length of your sleeve. If you're making a short sleeve, of course, you take measurement from the shoulder bone. That's where your shoulder line usually ends when you're drafting the basic pattern. So from that point to whatever length or short sleeve you're making, you record that. Then from here to the elbow line, you record that as the elbow length, and then the full length of the sleeve, which is from the top of the sleeve to the wrist. So that makes the full length of the sleeve, right? So for the horizontal measurement, you place the tape underneath the armpit this way and measure it straight. Okay, don't do this, or measure it this way, and that is the bicep circumference. You know, just the bicep, you take it around the bicep. It's usually the biggest part of the sleeve. Then if you're making a long sleeve, of course, you move on to the elbow to measure the elbow circumference. Now when you are doing this, you don't want it too tight because the elbow is a joint, right? So it still needs to move. So make sure that your client folds their hand a little bit so that it automatically adds some ease to it. So that way there will be freedom of movement there. Around the wrist, if you're working with a non-stretchy fabric, you want to ease it a little bit just so it is wide enough for the palm to pass through. But if you're working with a very stretchy fabric, you don't need to do that. You can have it fitted up until the wrist. So that is it with the sleeve measurement you need. Let's move on to the table. So create a basic sleeve block. You will be needing your pattern paper, your pattern curve. What you need is a ruler and a curve, and then you may need your tracing wheel, your pen, of course. I'm using a marker for teaching purpose, and also your scissors. So I'm making use of the following body measurement. We're making a basic sleeve pattern. It's a full length of sleeve. I'll start with the vertical measurement. The cap heights haven't been calculated. We'll do that together. And then the elbow length of 13 inches and the wrist length of 22 inches. Then for the circumferences, the bicep circumference I'll be using is 14 inches. The elbow circumference is 12 inches and the wrist circumference is 9 inches. Now I have my paper here which I'll be putting on fold because we'll be creating both the side of the sleeve that will be attached to the front bodies and the side of the sleeve curve that will be attached to the back bodies on this same pattern before tracing out the other side. So let me start by creating my margin right here. Okay, so this is the center of the sleeve, which will be on fold, while this is the free edge of the sleeve where we'll have our side seam. So I'll start by estimating the cap height for this measurement. I have a basic bodice block here which I created in the previous tutorial. If you haven't watched the tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice block, you can go check it out. I'll drop the link in the description box. So for this, I made use of a bust circumference of 40 inches. So we'll be creating a sleeve for these bodies. So because of that, I need to calculate my cap height. The cap height can be estimated using the bust circumference. So you divide the bust circumference by 12 and add 1 inch to that value. So because the bust circumference here is 40 inches, so we'll divide 40 inches by 12, and that gives me 3.3 inches. Then I will add 1 inch to that, and that leaves me with 4.3 inches. I always like to round up the figure for this because honestly it's an estimate. So I'll be making use of 4.5 inches for my cap height. So from my margin here, I'll mark 4.5 inches and draw my bicep lines here. 4.5, 4.5 bicep line. Let me label that BL. Next, I'll go ahead and mark the horizontal measurement. Our elbow length of 13 inches and the full length of the sleeve 22 inches. 22. So now we are going ahead to create the elbow line. So let's label it EL, and then the wrist line here, WL. From the measurement we took a bicep circumference, right? So divide our bicep circumference by 2 and take that measurement here. So the bicep circumference I'm using is 14 inches. So divided by 2, I have 7. So having marked that on my bicep line, I will connect that to the tip of the sleeve right here. That leaves me with a slanted line right there. So I'll take the measurement of this line and divide it by 2. That gave me this. So I'll mark that midpoint and come upward by half an inch from this midpoint. So from here I can then create my back sleeve curve. So I'll place my pattern curve this way. You don't want the slant too sharp, so you don't want to make it very sharp. You want it to curve into this part of the sleeve. You don't want anything sharp, but then what we want to do is connect here to this dot and bring it down here. So just watch this. So at this point I like to twist this around, but then I don't let it go below this our line right here. So I like to still make it slightly S-shape-ish. Pardon me, there's no word like that. Now what we have just done is we have created the back sleeve curve, and next we'll move on to the front sleeve curve. And what we want to do is connect this tip of the curve to the slanted line. Then it will have a curve that goes below the slanted line, connected to the bust line, exactly where we initially connected the front, the back sleeve curve. So what we'll do now is mark this way. Let me use another pen for the front just so it's more visible. So this is what we have for the front, and then turn it around this way. Don't take it too deep, okay? Just like maximum of half an inch this way. So this lower line we have here represents the front sleeve curve, while the less curvy line at the top is the back sleeve curve. So at this junction we're going ahead to mark the elbow circumference divided by 2. I believe I said we're making use of 12. So I'm marking 12 inches divided by 2, which is 6 inches here. At the wrist line here, we're making use of the wrist circumference divided by 2, and that is 9 inches divided by 2, so 4.5. Now I am going to draw a line or a curve connecting the bust line to the elbow line. Now you can simply make it straight, or you may want to, make it slightly curvy like so, this way. And then from here I'll be connecting it to my wrist here. So I think for this straight will look better, just because just because of the circumferences I worked with. So I told you already that I folded this pattern at the beginning, right? So what I'm going to do now is to trace it onto the other side so I can mark out the front. Okay, let's do this together. I'll trace only the front curve. Then on here, I'll have only the front curve. So your sleeve curve fits right into the armhole curve on the pattern. So here's the armhole curve for the front pattern. You want to make sure that this armhole curve for the front is exactly the same length you have here, because when you sew this on this, you don't want this to be longer or this to be shorter pattern. Here's what you will do. Now, I haven't added seam allowances to this. So for this, I won't be making use of this outer line, which is my seam allowances. I'll be making use of the black line inside. So I want to measure what I have here without the seam allowance so that I can compare it with what I have right here. So here I have 9.5 inches. This is for the front. I'll do the same thing for the back. I'll come here and measure this as well without the seam allowance and see if I have at least similar. So what I have here is almost 9 inches. We have almost 9 inches right here. Now this is 9.5 and this is 9. It is easy for me to manipulate my fabric for this to fit into this armhole. Once the difference is not more than half an inch, you can work with it. But if it is up to 1 inch, 2 inches, you need to make some adjustments. So you do the same thing for the back pattern as well. Take your back bodies and compare the curve with this outer line, which is the back sleeve curve. So for instance, if I had taken this measurement and the curve I have here is much longer than what I have on the bodies, what I will do is reduce the cap height I initially used. Remember that I mentioned that this is an estimation, you did your calculation and all that, but sometimes you have to adjust your pattern to fit into what you want to make. So for this, in the case where that happens, the sleeve curve is longer than the armhole curve on your bodies, go ahead and reduce the cap height you have on the sleeve pattern. On the other hand, if what you have here is not as long as what you have here, if it is shorter, much shorter, 1 inch and above shorter than what you have on the armhole curve, you go ahead and increase the cap height you used on your sleeve pattern. So that way you can continue to adjust your pattern until you find the curve that sits right into the armhole curve. Now let's go ahead and add seam allowances to this pattern. I usually add 1 inch side seam allowance, but it's okay to make it half an inch if that is what you like to work with. So but for this, I'm making use of 1 inch side seam allowance. I usually make use of half an inch for the neckline, armhole. So the same thing will go for my sleeve curve right here. So I'll just follow the same curve I have on the pattern, adding half an inch, still turn my curve around, let it just follow what you have initially here and blend it into the side seam allowance. So on this side, I'm going to add seam allowance to the back sleeve curve. So here's what I'll do. Now on the hem of this pattern, depending on what you want to do to the hem, okay, but for a turn up effect, let's assume you're using a lining and all that and you want to turn it up, this is what you should do. measure the length of the turn up or the length of the allowance you want to use. So I'm just taking 2 inches here, and I will draw that line. So I'll go ahead to fold this allowance. I'll fold from the actual hem of the sleeve and trace what I have here onto the same allowance. This is so that you won't have a shortage when you eventually fold the allowance in. So now I have just replicated this here. Now we have our sleeve pattern here with all the allowances added already. I'll go ahead now to cut out this pattern. So when this is transferred to the fabric, you're going to stitch. It is nice to label this, guys. So this is the front and this is the back. So what will happen is, once the front and back piece of your fabric has been sewn together, this part, which is the tip of your sleeve, you can notch it, fits into the shoulder part of your armhole, and then you fix this towards the back and fix this towards the front. So you need 2 pieces of this. So when transferring this to fabric, if it's not something asymmetrical, then you are cutting 2 fabric with this. You just lay your pattern on the fabric and cut this out. And once you have added the same allowances on the pattern, you don't need to do that again on the fabric. So with this, I have come to the end of this tutorial. I hope this was clear enough. If you have questions, you can drop it in the comment section. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Please give this video a thumbs up. See you in the next video. Bye.